November 21st. That means that a lot of you are going to have a 4-day weekend coming up, right, Andy? Yep, Thanksgiving is a scant 3 days away. And happy Thanksgiving early to everyone out there. For those of you traveling, be safe. I don't know what the roads are going to be like, Andy. Maybe you can get me an extended forecast for the roads and for everybody that might be traveling. Thursday, Wednesday. Are you traveling, Andy? No, I don't. Yeah, I probably am. I travel every Thanksgiving somewhere. So, but no, it's not. Yeah, I throw a dart everything. Where am I going to Thanksgiving, And then the day after Thanksgiving is the dreaded. Let's go to brunch and do shopping. We'll go brunch. All right, we'll get right to that. We're going to clear the air. It's smoky as devil's night in here. Snoop says it's smoky. We're going to clear the air on something. Andy asked me this morning, it came up last week. They're like, Pipewrench, you did the show Growing Up 70s, that 70s show in Missoula where you went to high school. And it's like, well, what? High school was 4 years. And so I tell people that I grew up in Detroit. Wayne County, to be exact. Wayne County is to Detroit like Cook County is to Chicago, like Orange County is to L.A. If you say you're from Wayne County, you're from Detroit. So let's kind of clear the air on it. I actually spent more of my childhood in Detroit than I did in Missoula. I was born in Pontiac, Michigan. That's in Oakland County. That's right next door to Detroit. And then I was raised in Wayne County till I was born in 1956, and we came out here, the first time I came out here after the divorce, when I was 14, that would be in I spent New Year's from 69 to 70 in Montana. The first time I spent that was, there you go. So I spent more time growing up in Motown, okay? And when I grew up in Detroit, it wasn't the Detroit that you see now. Okay, it just wasn't. Detroit, my parents were from Detroit. One set of grandparents were from Detroit, families from Detroit. The other set of family, as you may or may not know from the podcast, are from upstate New York. That has presently, what is it, Andy? 89,000 feet of snow? My mom's side of the family is Lake Erie, Dunkirk, Fredonia, Sheridan, just a little bit south of Buffalo. And news, I looked there, they had 6 feet, 8 inches of snow. But anyway, I grew up in Detroit. And when I was growing up, all through the 14 years till I moved out here in 1970, Detroit was the third largest city in the country behind New York and Chicago. Okay? It was clean. Okay? Everybody had a job. There was places to go. There was things to do. It was a boom town during World War II and Korea. Anything that was war-related, transports, planes, trains, automobiles, Steve Martin, John Candy movie. Yeah, anything. Made in Detroit. Of course, Henry Ford was there. And the Hudsons, and the Cadillacs, and the Chrysler family, okay? the Pontiac family. Those were all families, cars. So it was big. It was really big. It was really clean. I was young enough to go to some pretty cool places that were no longer there. I went to my first Detroit Tiger game and spent the summer of 68 watching the Tigers with my brother. We went to the World Series at the old Tiger Stadium, right there on the corner of Trummel in Michigan. Of course, there was the Olympia Gardens. That was where the Red Wings played. And there was boxing there, like Joe Louis. They had an arena in Detroit named after him. When they tore Olympia Gardens down, they built Joe Louis Arena, where the Wings won five Stanley Cups, and that's named after the boxer, who's, of course, from Detroit. So, there's the Palace of Auburn Hills was there when I was there. The Lions played outside of Tiger Stadium, and then the Silverdome came along. I've never been to Ford Field. There's a cool place in Detroit. I'm laying the groundwork. Detroit, first of all, Detroit invented suburbs. The very first city to build them. Why? Because they needed them. Why? Because people need to commute they didn't want to live in town. So and of course, then came freeways, not expressways, not interstate highways, 2-lane freeways cutting through cities, and also an invention of Detroit. It's the Motor City, remember? Anything to do with cars was there, okay? I dropped the Cadillac and the Fords, but also the Firestone, the Goodyear people, the Goodrich people, B.F. Goodrich. Yep, he's from Detroit too. He had a factory there. So anything automotive related. And it was booming when I was a kid. I was born 56. So it was banging. Okay, people have babies, baby boomers. Outside of Detroit, still, where in Dearborn is the proving grounds for Ford, and you'd go out there and you'd watch them doing the Ford, proving grounds, watching the new Mustangs. And when I was a kid, I was going out there in the '60s watching '60s muscle cars, real ones. Right next to the proving grounds in Dearborn is a place called Greenfield Village. And Greenfield Village is a village where it's half of Civil War and half Revolutionary War. And they've gone all over the country. It's owned by the Fords. They went all over the country and got stuff. Like, Ford's Theater in wherever John Wilkes Booth, shot Lincoln. They have the Chair. They have buildings from that era that they went and got, and so they have people live there. It's really a freaking cool place. Okay? And so, you're thinking to yourselves now, it's like, geez, Christ, dude, you're talking about, plus we had great bands too, you had Motown Sound. Okay, you had, a handful of Alice Cooper, Mitch Ryder, Grand Funk Railroad, Ted Nugent, Amboy Dukes, and all sorts of bands there. Shopping downtown. Remember, you've all heard of Macy's? Macy's originated in New York City by some guy named Macy, and his competitor was some guy named Gimbel. And so in New York City, there's Macy's and Gimbel's in Manhattan, or there was the last time I was in Manhattan. And that would be the 70s, 80s. Detroit had, they were competitors. They built these, the joke is, elevator, sporting goods, second floor, women's lingerie, fourth floor, menswear, sixth floor, J.L. Hudson's, and the guy was Hudson's, and there's no relation between the Hudson's family that owned the car or in the department store owner. Or I don't believe there is, Andy. Maybe you want to research that for me real well. Okay. So everybody's like, well, geez, Mike, Pipe, you know, what the hell are you talking about? Well, it was boomtown. What happened? And it's over. What happened? Why everybody's like, what the hell? I lived in 14 Mile Road, so I had a slant so I could see down to the Detroit River, because Detroit's like that. I go to work sometimes I go to work with my dad in the winter, and it was in the fall because, we have the holidays and stuff. Like, Dad wouldn't have a 3-day, 4-day weekend back then. We'd have, So what we do is, and work was at CKLW in Windsor, Ontario. And my roots from radio are well, and being on air are well documented. We take the tunnel on the way to work, the Detroit-Windsor tunnel on the way to work. Because it'd be daylight. We'd be like, whoa, shit, we're in the tunnel. We're all going to die. The waves are going to crash in. We'll never get to go to brunch again. Well, then we take the bridge at night so we can see all the city lit up, the Ambassador Bridge, home from work. So it was great memories. Detroit was great. It was, like I said, third largest city, and then it was over. And there's a real good documented reason. But as a kid living there, I could say better than anyone. My family lived there. The the riots were in '67, summertime, because the '68 Tiger World Series team kind of helped unify. If I even want to use that term, the city again, and it didn't, but it was a common bond that brought people together. The race riots in 1967 is the only time that the United States has occupied an American territory or city with the 101st Airborne. They just had troops landed in Detroit. People were just, burn this, burn that. And that, I'm not sure, Andy, how even to put this, but it's a document. You can look at Wiki, you can look at the decline of Detroit, but here's what happened. Detroit was a blue-collar working town, which in the 50s and 60s meant white administration, black union workers. And Detroit's pro-union. Jimmy Hoffa was there. We had AFL-CIO, auto workers, and there's unions to belong to a union. So what happened when the riots happened, and my family was an example. The night of the riots, we were in the back of the backyard, and there was a back porch. It was brick, and it was back in the 70s and in 60s, and I don't even know how to explain the porch, but we could see on a good night all the way. We were at 14 Mile Road. Okay, you come all the way out Middle Belt, all the way from City Center till you hit Orchard Lake Highway. You take right or left. You take a left. Doesn't matter with the cameras. You take a left to come back into Detroit, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9 miles of city limits, if anybody's familiar with the movie 9 Mile, starring Detroit's own Eminem. That's how, I remember sitting out, and the kids, I'm only, 12? I'm like, are they going to come out here and burn our house down? That was my reaction as a child. So, Mom and Dad divorced, and I was out of there by, like I said, 69, 70. I went to high school in Missoula, Sentinel. That's a whole new other podcast. So you had a white abandonment of Detroit, which took with them Hudson Auto. It downgraded General Motors. Firestone moved to Canada. B.F. Goodrich died and moved to was it Pittsburgh? Okay. You lost that base. There was also going on in 1968 forced segregation, which wasn't pro or con. I don't know how you were. I'm just saying that's for the time. That's what Remember the Titans movie is about, was that era of schools doing that, if you look it up. I think Remember the Titans was even a little after, or 70s. Okay? Unemployment. White base leaves, and then the creme de la creme, and the rise of gas prices, and the gates opening from hell, the import market. And there you go, people. From a person who has family there, who has been back there, I was back to watch Wings games and all of that, but it's it's gutted. The town is gutted, and it's not doing any better. It's kind of like stable. It's like it's in OR or ER, and it's in intensive care, but he's stable enough, wait, we're going to give him brunch through a feeding tube. So, Detroit crashed and burned by its own 60s problems. And that's what it was. Pollution out of control. Okay? There's no regulation. Rivers are catching on fire down the road. And I moved out here, and I carried with me traditions that aren't even out here. I think we covered Devil's Night once. Let me talk about Devil's Night. Devil's Night, when I was a kid, growing up in Detroit. So that's declining, basically ending. First of all, that's what happened in Detroit. You had the riots, the race riots, you had forced segregation, you had unemployment because of the white base leaving town, inner city had no jobs. Import market took over the Hudsons, the Chryslers, the Fords, General Motors, Chevy. It staggered them in the early 70s, late 60s. Gas prices, boom. Detroit, all their eggs were in one basket. So, Andy, anyway, I come out here. I referred to Devil's Night once, but I come out here, and it's a tradition in Detroit that you go out and cause havoc the night before Halloween. We called it Devil's Night. It's like, we're going out Devil's Night. We're going to we're going to soap windows and TP trees in people. If we didn't really like you, we'd wax your windows with like candles, so you'd have to get out. You couldn't just wash it off. And if we really didn't like you, we'd put M80s and blow your freaking mailbox. Like a boom, we don't like them. Blow their mailbox off. We set garbage cans on fire, and it was all normal to me. I remember one night in Detroit, and my brother's friends, and we lived about a mile and a half from Middle Belt. They went out to Middle Belt, and I tagged along. They took a can of gasoline kerosene and poured it down the middle of a Middle Belt highway and waited to traffic to let it burn, It's like, so for me, it just, harmless pranks, it's really gotten out of hand in Detroit. Now they burn houses down. But I remember when I first came out here, Andy, to Missoula to high school, I was like, what are we going to do on Devil's Night, And they're like, what are you talking about? It's like, I don't like stuff. Let's go burn his house. You know, let's burn it. Burn, Davey, burn. You're like Chris Farley. You know, I wanted to burn shit, wax windows, and do this and do that. And, you know, Don Boffman, Steve Gleason, and Mark McCork, all the kids I'm going around high school with, they're like, hey, we don't do that here. You know, what are you talking about? It's like devils, sorry. We're devils, you know. So maybe that, too, coupled with the race riots, forced segregation, unemployment, white base, import market, and also the tax market trying to make up for it. And now, you know, they had tax was just, it was a beautiful city. It's like a wagon, it's like a half a wagon wheel. And right downtown is Sir Caris Park, and that's your, you know, that's, you know, like 13 years old, I saw Jefferson Airplane there. So the decline was gradual, but not. I mean, my parents, 67, by 69, they were divorced, liquidated, whatever they were liquidated. Grandma and Grandpa moved to Arizona, and my mom and the kids, boom, we're out of here. So that's the story of the decline of Detroit, Andy, and how I grew up there. I grew up there in a very middle-class area of Detroit, and my parents were very middle-class, and everything was, you know, here's a family, here's a Brady Bunch, you know, whatever the freak the song goes. Here's a story about a family, but we weren't a blended family, even though my brothers, older brothers, were all from, well, I guess we were the Brady Bunch, but we, you know, we were not the Peterson Bunch, because Pipewrench is my stage. You don't really, people out there don't really think my mom named me Pipewrench, do you? Come on, man! All right, what do we want, Andy? We want winter to go away already? We do. I'll tell you what, man, it was a sight to behold this weekend. And for those of you that have been living under a rock in Montana, the annual Brawl of the Wild went on Saturday. And beforehand, I watched every bit of it. Did you watch every? Yep. They had, you know, the 3-hour college game day was in Bozeman, but also the half-hour show that was like preview to game day or whatever. And so game day with Kirk Herbstreit and Lee Corso and Desmond Howard and company was in Bozeman. And Andy, it was cold, 3 below, coldest game day ever. They were like, Jesus! And they were cold because it's like, I should have texted Des before and say, look, a nice big wool coat and a head scarf and a scarf will not do you one bit of good if you're wearing loafers with socks. You need wool. Am I right, people? Am I right? Am I right? Okay, Montana at 3 below. So game day was in Bozeman. They made a hoop-de-hoo. Man, it marked Lee Corso's return to game day. And he'd been out since, was it October 22nd, I believe, the 2012th or the 22nd. We don't know why, but Lee didn't look like Lee. Corso didn't, but yeah, if you watched, Kirk Herbstreit was really keeping an eye on him. So, but the game would have been nice if the Grizzlies would have shown up for the game. What was it, 19,000 to 21? So that Grizzlies have to deal with that 19,000 point loss for a whole year until next year they do it again. But GameDay it was just, they did good skits. They showed some humorous signs. The announcer seemed to, Pat McCaffrey was a hoot. Did a thing that he was bull riding and posted, yeah, I'm bull riding. It's like, you're not bull riding, you're freaking steer wrestling, man. You hang out with the rodeo people and you can't even get the wording right. But it was a sight to be sold. Those guys were cold. So it was a joy. Watched the game. I had the one eye on, what's Saturday? I had one eye on the Grizz game, Cats game. And after a while, it was a lazy eye because it was a blowout. Michigan won in the last 9 seconds. 9 seconds. Oh, don't get me wrong. I'll take the win that pushes us to 11-0. But 9 seconds, man. People were out. JJ wasn't hitting that. But we're still 11-0. TCU also remained undefeated. Georgia remained undefeated. Ohio State remained. Michigan remained. And TCU needed a last-second field goal. And it was like last second, Andy. It was no time on the clock. So they're undefeated. So by Michigan and Ohio State winning, it sets up the game. The game will air Saturday at 10 a.m. Mountain Standard Time on Fox Sports. Michigan Wolverines are at the Ohio State University Buckeyes, that team down south. And it should be a Donnybrook. J.J. McCarthy says he thinks that Michigan's better this year than they were last year. And I'm agreed with him, but not when he plays like crap. I also don't think Ohio State is as good because of injuries as they were. So it ought to be interesting. Go Blue. We're going to get crazy about it later in the week, but that's that. I want to touch on Idaho. Do I got time? Idaho, University of Idaho. Go Blue. One more in the game. Michigan, Ohio State, the game. University of Idaho at Moscow, Big Sky Conference member. Red Rum! Red Rum! Red Rum! Can you believe it? As of the 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 5:30 this morning, nobody has a fucking clue. My opinion, they're stabbed with a large knife. They are up close and personal. So, yeah, it's disturbing. It's shocking. You know, it's a party house. The people that weren't killed were like, yeah, it's just a party house. We lock the door, bedroom, and, tune it out. They're not. Yeah. So it's pretty disturbing. It's a town. Moscow, Idaho is how big? 28,000, 30,000? University of Idaho. It's right up there in the Panhandle, isn't it, a little bit? Good-looking girls, good-looking guy. Seemed successful. Didn't seem like it was like a meth house or anything, Andy. I don't know. Maybe, we don't know anything. So cops don't have a clue. Go figure. Oh, what else? Oh, geez. Andy, do you have a Twitter account? As you may or may not heard, Elon is just destroying Twitter. He's bought it. He's now ruining it. I got a friend that lives out of town. He works for a large tech IT company. I said, what's the story? he says that the most mainframe of employees have quit. So if you have a Twitter account, Andy, if you have a Twitter, anybody, he's like, dump it because it's not secure. Nobody's working security now. As stuff starts to crash, he's not going to be able to fix it. I don't know if this is a billion-dollar plan, and could have spent that money helping homeless and feeding homeless and shelter dogs instead of buying Twitter and running it into the ground. It's like, well, it wasn't making money. It's like, well, it's not making money now, is it? So, big news is, yeah, but he let Trump back on Twitter. It's like, Andy, does it look like I care that who he let back on, didn't let back on? And I don't care what Elon, Donald, I don't care. You know, my buddy says it's just a matter of time. Twitter will crash, and then he won't be able to fix it. So, remember, be careful on Twitter. You have no security. Okay? Like Putin. What's Putin doing? Putin's just blowing shit up, antagonizing people. You know, the same old drill. You know, people in New York, do your little drill. Everybody else, learn to duck and cover, right? All right, we're going to wind this up, Andy. This Monday morning. It's a Thanksgiving week. It's a 3-day work week. I'm not here for the rest of the week. I might be in here. Today's Monday. I'll be in here till 10, 11 o'clock, and then I'm going to be out of here and probably out of town and driving roads. So if you're traveling, be safe, drive safe, fly safe, be cool in airports, don't flip out, don't get the TSA people pissed off, don't get kicked off of flights, be polite, be courteous, kiss your dogs, adopt, don't shop, rescue, foster, get involved, spay and neuter. Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody. Until next week. Andy, we are running late, and we are out of here, right?